on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the hard knock life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share their interests together with a similar kind. When they said John Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments and the lectures, fanboys, professional artists and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the N.O.C. In full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life. Comics, movies, and TV. Yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.
Did you miss us? We're back. Hard NOC Life, episode 12. The mid-season wrap-up. We've decided to bring back some of our all-stars from this past season and kind of just have a hodgepodge talking about a bunch of different topics that's out there in the world. So we got a large panel, so I don't want to take up too much time blabbing and get to introducing everybody. So let's start off with she's from Long Beach, but she's currently in the Bay Area learning how to be a hacker, I guess. Learn how to tap all our phones and monitor all of our internet operations. She's she's also our resident Korra expert. You may have read a lot of her Korra recaps throughout the season. Find her on Twitter at Julie Kang. Welcome, Julie Kang.
Hi, Keith. How's it going?
I'm good. How you doing? Are you eyes bloodshot? Are you?
Yeah, you can't tell.
Are you living in the Matrix?
Yes, I'm totally plugged in. You can't see the cord, but.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I'll save your data first in the data apocalypse.
Next up is another regular who's been on the show multiple times. He's a professor down in Old Dominion University. He's Shawn Smith. That's all I'm gonna say. What's up, Shawn?
What's going on, my friend?
Welcome back. It's been a while. We've missed you. We haven't seen you in a few weeks.
I've been busy trying to mold young minds and create productive criminologists and failing miserably at it, but, they still pay me, so.
Right, yeah. That's what's most important.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Next up is a fellow Virginian who's actually out in Brooklyn now. He's another regular on Hard NOC Life. It's Raymond Chow. What's up, Raymond? That'd be a lot funnier if you weren't muted.
Oh, they moved the mute button. Okay.
Fail!
Right.
Fail!
It's the season finale. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm not even going to edit that part out this time.
No,
We're just
it's fine.
We're going to keep it like that. How you doing?
There's really nowhere to go. Just move on to the next person.
Well, that's true. Also on the panel tonight is another fellow Korra recapper. So it's the last time these two were on together, they were just fanboying and fangirling over Jean Yang. But Rodrigo decided to come back and join us. You can find him on Twitter at RSC Spoken Word. Welcome back, Rodrigo.
What's up, everybody?
How cold is it up in Minnesota right now? There you go.
Not cold. In my living room.
So thanks for being back on the show, Rodrigo. I think, are those your kids? Are they watching Marvel Lego superheroes right now?
Actually, my older kids are upstairs sleeping. My young one, who is the N.O.C in training, is watching Despicable Me.
Let's bring on Angela Rhee. She loves being on the show. That's her contribution to the Nerds of Color is being on Hard NOC Life. Welcome back, Angela.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm on 1,000 podcasts and I want to write, but I'm doing a real job. I apologize.
It's fine. We love having you on Hard NOC Life and hearing your opinions about all
I
the
will
things.
try not to have a nerd meltdown if we talk about Arrow, because I have issues.
Yeah, well, actually, this is why I wanted you on too. So let's get into it. What I wanted to get to, there are a couple of things that's out there in the nerd ether, and probably the biggest splash that happened is the fact that Zack Snyder and I guess is Christopher Nolan still involved? I don't know if he is or not. They went out.
Executive producer, so his money is involved.
His money's involved, but I think as far as creatively, I think he's kind of backburnered his involvement. But anyway, they cast Wonder Woman, we finally have a live-action Wonder Woman that's not Linda Carter. If you've been living under an internet rock, Gal Gadot, who's best known as I don't know what her name was in the Fast and Furious franchise, but she played Sung Kang's love interest.
Actually have names, or are they just like archetypes that sometimes blow up?
Right. Well, she's the chick Sung Kang made out with in a car, and now she's and Sung Kang can say made out with Wonder Woman.
Fridged? Oh, didn't her character get fridged in the last Fast and the Furious?
Oh, did she? I haven't seen Fast 6 yet, so I don't know. Well, anyway, Gal Gadot is now the new Wonder Woman, and it's kind of broken the internet in half. What do we think about this? I mean, she's for those of you who don't know, she's a model. She's an Israeli Miss Israel a couple times, I think. She has a fairly thin film resume, but you know, Zack Snyder saw something in her, and now she's Wonder Woman. Let's take it to you, Raymond. I know you and I have talked, and you don't really have an opinion, but
Yeah,
I'm going to make you have an opinion.
Okay.
So I'm going to make you have an opinion about it. What do you think, as someone who's not a big fan of like the DC cinematic universe to begin with?
But she's you said that she's Israeli.
Yeah.
So like, does that mean she has military training? Because that would be good for
Yes.
Wonder Woman. Yeah.
Yeah, and she actually does. She's spent 2 years.
Wonder Woman doing Krav Maga is pretty good. I'm cool with that.
I mean, the other issue about Gal is that she's fairly slight in terms of physical stature. How important is that, Shawn?
I've seen people do some pretty extreme things. I mean, listen, whether it's Chris Evans transforming himself to become Steve Rogers. But my thing is this: first and foremost, I'm kind of just happy that they picked a woman to play a lead role who isn't kind of like the normal, kind of like 20 to early 30-something waspish type of females that are out there. I mean, I'm not saying that the ethnicity is the main thing, but I like the fact that they picked somebody who is both of a lineage that is clearly not American, but also someone who has a pretty short resume. Let this be a springboard for her, and if nothing else, let's just wait and see what we get, because she may, just like with Chris Evans. I mean, I think people kind of forget that he was also Torch, and he's done some other things that have been wonderful, but now you look at him and you can say, okay, you know what, that's Captain America now. And he took it. He owned it. Maybe she could do this with Wonder Woman. So.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up the fact that she's not waspish, and I know that Wonder Woman, a live-action Wonder Woman, has been a fairly popular topic on the Nerds of Color. We've had a lot of traffic going to our posts about potential Wonder Woman movies, and one of those posts was written by Sean Taylor, who a couple months ago wrote about what Hollywood could do to make a successful Wonder Woman film, and one of his suggestions was to not cast a white actress. Although Linda Carter is the kind of standard bearer for a live-action Wonder Woman, the Wonder Woman of the comics is based in Greek mythology. So, Julie, do you think the fact that they've cast, a quote-unquote ethnic actress is a step in the right direction for Wonder Woman?
Yeah, the Wonder Woman in my head definitely is not Zooey Deschanel.
That would be an interesting Wonder Woman.
Yeah, that was who was in my head. Thank you.
But I'm keeping an open mind. I am of the ilk where if we can get it funded, even a mediocre Wonder Woman movie is better than no Wonder Woman movie, especially because you don't want Wonder Woman defined by her big gaping absence in this kind of new trend of reviving old comic book characters. And I'm intrigued. I mean, she is a model, so she is slight of frame, but she claims she was a commander in the army, so maybe they've given a bunch of protein powder and a trainer, she can bulk up. Yeah, I think a lot of people also kind of look back on the Linda Carter days with a little bit of very darkly tinted rose-colored lenses, where people say sometimes, "Oh, I miss Linda Carter's curves," but if you look at movies of her, she was very thin. I mean, she had big boobs, but her waist was tiny. She wasn't this what I would consider an Amazonian frame anyway, but she did a great job. She made a very compelling Wonder Woman. So why not this relative newbie? I'm keeping an open mind.
Yeah, and it kind of, the other interesting aspect of her casting is that, the fact that she is a relative unknown is interesting because the rest of the cast is filled with fairly, named actors. I mean, you have everyone from the Man of Steel movie, including Amy Adams and Lawrence Fishburne and Kevin Costner and all those people. And then they cast Ben Affleck of all people to play Batman. And now you have this newcomer. I mean, I guess you could say Henry Cavill is not that well known, but he's Superman. People recognize him as Superman. Angela, a couple weeks ago, you were on when we talked about why Hollywood would or wouldn't ever have a Wonder Woman, a live action Wonder Woman. Now that we've entered that time period, and I'm curious what you think as far as.
I don't really have my hopes up because it's reported that she's not a starring character; she's a supporting character.
Yeah.
So she's probably going to get the Amy Adams treatment, where we get nothing of her character. Amy Adams is gnarly. It's like I'm kind of excited because we have Wonder Woman on the big screen, but it's in a Zack Snyder DC. And Man of Steel wasn't that good. I hope she does a good job, but I don't think you can spin shit into gold.
That's true.
I mean, that's the thing is that, like, to bounce off of her points, like, is this movie going to be 6 hours long? Because how are you going to have all three people? Like, you're going to have a new Batman. You're going to have Superman feeling bad about killing people. Oh, spoiler alert, Superman kills people now. And you're going to introduce Wonder Woman. So, like, how do you fit that and not have it be 7 billion hours long? And so who is going to be the person that you reduce the time for? It's going to be Wonder Woman.
Right. Well, and that goes back to, I think, Angela's original point about
exactly.
casting not just a relative unknown, but like someone nobody knows who she is. Like she was like 8th lead in Fast and the Furious.
At the end of the day, no matter who's playing the role, if it's a shitty representation of Wonder Woman, look, whoever you put in the role, just let it be a fair representation. I mean, actually, even to Raymond's point, look, if you're only going to give her a grand total of 10 minutes of screen time out of a 2.5-hour movie, then you know what? What's the point? I mean, I don't. That to me is just that's doing more of a disservice than even who ends up being cast. So.
Well, and I don't want to spend too much time belaboring the point on the Man of Steel sequel, but I'm going to because it's my show. Goddammit. That's right. I said that. If we look at where Warner Brothers is going with their DC Cinematic, I made this point, and to some people's chagrin, that one of the mistakes that Warner Brothers is making in trying to cram everything into the sequel. Because that's the other thing. It's a sequel to Superman, right? It's not even supposed to be It's supposed to. There are all these threads that Raymond alluded to earlier that were left off in Man of Steel that they're supposed to also tie up as well. But now you're throwing in all this other crap. What I feel is one of the mistakes is not following the Marvel template and trying to start from scratch with everything crammed into this new DC cinematic universe rather than building off of previous films. So I wrote a post on the Nerds of Color a couple weeks ago about how perhaps they should have used the Dark Knight trilogy, an already established Batman, and already, they have all those characters, they have all those, situations that Batman has gone through. Because, Ben Affleck is playing an older, war-weary Batman. If they use Christian Bale in the Christopher Nolan films as a springboard, then you have that's a whole lot of space that's freed up for introducing new characters to this film. And part of the appeal, I feel, of the Marvel films is that even though Captain America, Iron Man, Thor are individual franchises, they still feel part of a connected universe. And that's what the appeal of the Avengers was. So
no, I kind of wish that DC went the other way, and instead of embracing the Marvel tack, we already know Superman, we already know Batman, and like this is part of my problem with Man of Steel is like, do we really need another origin story when 2006 we already had, like, let's just have a movie with we already know who the characters are, and it's it's Batman and Superman. They're the biggest characters you could possibly have. Everybody knows their story. I feel like
watching Superman.
Right.
Yeah.
Where they can just already be heroes, and you can just introduce the actual plot, and I just feel like, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that was always like people's assumption that would be the tack Warner Brothers would take, that they would start off with a Justice League film, like if Man of Steel never came out, that they would start with a Justice League film and then spin off franchises from a Justice League film, rather, and like basically go the opposite direction of the Avengers and have a full-on Justice League film that would springboard new Batman movies, new Superman movies, new Wonder Woman movies. And I feel like that's kind of what they're trying to do now with Man of Steel 2, is that we're that idea like that you're talking about. I mean, yes, they've wasted like four films, and if you think of The Dark Knight and The Man of Steel, if you just get rid of those, and you're starting basically with Justice League now, and you're springboarding off that. But anyway, but I do want to continue in the DC universe, and last night on the CW there was the long anticipated episode of Arrow that introduced Barry Allen, aired last night. He's going to get a spin-off, and there's been talk about should Arrow be part of the DC cinematic universe. I don't know how much of you watch Arrow. I know Shawn watches it a little bit. What do you think as far as like the kind of tone that they've set on Arrow over the last 1.5 seasons, and would it fit necessarily in a DC cinematic universe?
I mean, I'm fine with, and I mean, just to kind of back up for a second, because I caught on to Arrow. I just did a whole Netflix blitz, maybe like probably 4 months ago, before, so I kind of, I got into Arrow pretty much when it was over. It was about to hit season 2. But as I've commented off air, I like the fact that Arrow doesn't take itself very seriously. At least I don't think it does. I think it knows it's a little silly, and I'm okay with that, because it seems to work with the types of characters they have, and ultimately the types of actors that they have. I mean, I genuinely think that they're having fun making this show and telling this story that is mostly based off of the Arrow universe. Now, a spin-off with the Flash, personally, aside from Batman, the Flash is the character that I like the most. But that said, that I don't know that necessarily makes for the best show, and the reason why is because the thing with the Flash is, unlike your Batmans and your Supermans, and even Arrow to a certain extent, I think there's the potential for Flash to be a bit of a one-trick pony. I mean, he's fast, and it's kind of a running joke, actually, even in the comic community, I think, where, if Flash is so fast, then why is there ever crime, But see, that's to me is.
But that's also the knock against Superman, and in fact, I've been reading, and as to my chagrin, I've been reading the New 52 Superman Action Comics, and I'm only reading it because Greg Pak is writing it, and I actually tweeted out to Greg this morning that I'm trying to be a hater of the New 52, and I can't help liking Greg's take on Superman. And there was a scene in I think it was issue 25. Where Superman's sitting on the corner eating a sandwich, and he's listening to everything, and he can't stop all the crime in the world, even though he's Superman, right? But no, I mean, I think that's the dilemma of being a superhero. But continuing this conversation about Flash, one of the things that also came out in the news today is that there was a casting call that went out for the character of Iris West, who, if those of you are familiar with Flash canon, is the wife of Barry Allen, and I guess in this incarnation would be Barry Allen's potential, love interest girlfriend, and for later episodes in Arrow and potentially the Flash spinoff. One thing, Julie, that I wanted to bring to your attention is that the interesting thing about the casting call is that they're specifically looking for an African American actress. It's not even up to all races. They want Iris West to be an African American character. And so, another topic that's been popular on the Nerds of Color is the notion of cross-racial casting traditionally white characters. What do you? I don't know how familiar you are with Flash comics or the DC milieu in general, but the notion of fairly well-known in terms of like she's the Lois Lane in the Flash universe to be portrayed by an African American actress. What's your opinion on that? Do you think that's progress? Do you think that's unnecessary? What's your opinion?
Yeah, it's tough. There's a spectrum, right? There's two competing sides where you think, oh great, yet another woman is some strong male sidekick, woohoo progress. But then I think it's overshadowed in this part by slowly the images on TV are very slowly and very subtly starting to trend towards what I see in real life and what most people see in real life. And it's becoming, I think, less and less of a big deal to have women and men of color playing these traditional hero-heroine roles. And I think that's great. And also, I especially appreciate it because every time something like this gets announced, a new batch of racists announce themselves and come out of the closet on Twitter, and then then everyone gets shamed, and then it
right.
Slowly creates a more, I don't know, just society where people who normally can hide behind the safety of their little bubbles suddenly peek their heads out, and then we can squash them.
Right. Well, yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's kind of and this has been a debate on the Nerds of Color site, is the notion of traditionally white characters, being cross-racially cast as African Americans, or just non-white actors portraying those roles, and how that just from just a purely symbolic nature is a step in the right direction. I know, Rodrigo. I know you're a big fan of Arrow, and you've made the point multiple times that like the bad guys on the show have not been people of color, aside from I think there's a character called the Mayor. So, and being a fan of Arrow, what do you think of, like, is that a show that's trying to make progress? I know it's Julie brought up African American or sidekicks of color, and you could argue that Ollie's he's not a sidekick. His partner is John Diggle, who's a fairly prominent character on that show too. So where do you see Arrow falling in that kind of space?
I think when we were having a discussion on Nerds of Color page, we were talking about how like the main draw for me is just the live action aspect of seeing a superhero live action TV show. I think the last one that I saw, besides if you even want to consider Smallville live action.
Smallville, yo.
If you want to consider Smallville live action, that's probably the last one I really got into. And before that, if anyone remembers the Flash series of the early 2000s.
The early 90s, yeah.
Yeah, early 90s. That wasn't that bad. That was enjoyable, but I've enjoyed the aspect of the live action aspect, and be able to see like Canary and portrayed as in live and in color kind of sense, And my issues with Arrows to me, like when I first started watching it, was just that I felt like I was watching Batman. I do like the fact that John Diggle is a strong character. I wish it would develop that more. I just there's some issues with the Glades aspect of where all the people of color live in the Glades, except for
And
that.
then even that, right? Like I've noticed that the Glades is supposed to be like the rough, that is where you do see the majority of people of color extras, but like the main people are still like like Roy and Sin, who's supposed to be Asian in the comics actually, are white, But I mean, and going back to the Batman point, and that's always been a joke in the comics, is that Green Arrow is like a rich man's Batman, I guess, or a poor man's or poor rich man's Batman, as it were. But going back to Julie's point about if they do cast an African American actress to play Iris in a potential Flash series, you'll have another. It's another example of like you have the white male central figure, but also like a partner who is a woman of color. That's kind of been the trend lately. Like if you look at shows like Elementary with John Lee, what's his name? Miller with Lucy Liu, and then a show that we kind of shit on a little bit at the beginning of the season, Sleepy Hollow with Ichabod Crane and Nicole. I forget the actor, Tom Mison and Nicole Bahari. Those are shows where. Too. Well, yeah, I was gonna Shield. Oh, Shield. Talk about a show that you can stop watching, because I did that maybe 4 or 5 episodes ago. Anyway, but Sleepy Hollow was a show that we at the beginning of the season kind of felt that's ridiculous, but it's interesting how in the months since. I mean, it's still a ridiculous show, but it's also like one of the buzziest shows on television. There was a blog on Lee and Low Books wrote a blog about how it's ridiculous and important. It's made New Yorker articles have written about it. So Raymond, as someone who was flying the Sleepy Hollow flag early on, do you feel vindicated?
I do. I enjoy it whenever I'm right. You know that better than anyone. No, I mean like. I've been thinking about like what makes that show work, and I think another part of it is that one of the things that we get to do with fiction, one of the things that we get to do with fantasy, with historical fantasy, is that we kind of get to rewrite and analyze our history. And like, so the best moment of that show has been the Thomas Jefferson discussion, and like that. It's that way that we get to have our cake and eat it too. We get to enjoy and understand and respect and admire Thomas Jefferson, and we get to say, yeah, that guy was a dick.
Is that it? That's your point? Like you don't have a continuation of that?
I very often end my points with Thomas Jefferson as a dick.
Let me. I
as
just
a proud Virginian, I still end it with
right, and that's exactly what because you probably wax poetic about colonial history and particularly with respect to presidential figures,
right?
More than anybody. To hear you say Thomas Jefferson was a dick is great. That's
right.
awesome.
No, but that's right. That's the thing. Is that the ability. That's the thing. Is the cognitive distance of being able to lionize and criticize at the same time. Sleepy Hollow, by using the ridiculous conceits that it's using, is letting us play with these figures in a way that we actually get to connect with them and actually get to think about them,
And not to mention, also, it seems to do with historical material what TV shows oftentimes don't do is, in order for them to kind of make fun of Thomas Jefferson a little bit, they had to really look up some of the details about Jefferson's background, because even in that same episode, if I'm not mistaken, Ichabod, I think he goes to some like a museum or maybe
yeah. It's a Paul Revere museum.
Yeah, the Paul Revere museum, and you hear him kind of heckle the guy who's giving the talk about Paul Revere, like, no, that's not how it happened,
Right, exactly. Like I'm thinking of like if you're some young kid who's watching Sleepy Hollow and like, oh, there are other interpretations of history of these historical figures. Of course, the Sleepy Hollow ones are not real. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe George Washington does have a secret cabal that's been fighting against the devil. But the idea that there are other things to consider, like that's a mind-expanding moment, I think, for young kids, and I think that's a great thing.
Well, Julie, the other thing about Sleepy Hollow is that it's, like I said, on the internet especially. it's being lauded as this very important show, and you know, we have to also remember that it's not just those two characters. There is a whole cast of characters. You have what's her name on the show? What's Nicole Bahari's name on the show? Why is that? I only know her as Lieutenant. But she has the sister that's on the show, and you have Orlando Jones playing the police captain. So you have like a fairly large you know, representation of people of color in the main cast that they still surround the main white character, but they are prominent and strong characters in and of themselves. Why do you think the show is more than just, you know, entertaining, but has been deemed important?
Well, I think Raymond touched on it. I mean, it's become the television equivalent of A People's History of the United States. It's lower brow, obviously, but
yeah.
It's just something that touches upon the most basic patriotic time period of our country and kind of spins it and modernizes it at the same time. It's really intriguing, and that in and of itself is enough to watch. But I just personally, of the episodes I've seen, I just love how it just normalizes things that otherwise would get fetishized in mainstream culture. Just people of color working next to people of not color. You know, just doing their jobs. You know, everyone's competent. You know, and no one's off the wall goofy. You know, everyone is kind of meant to be taken seriously and just normal. Everything's just normal. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and then Rodrigo, there was a point I think you made in our roundtable about like there was the episode with the Native American mysticism, but they found a way to kind of address that without falling into like Native American mysticism stereotypes, right?
Yeah, I think also, I mean, the one thing I like about Sleepy Hollow, one thing to mention it's not, Sleepy Hollow is not a big city, you know, it's not like a metropolis area. To be able to say that there's that much diversity in a small town, that's a big thing to say, at least in my mind. I've lived in small towns, and being the only brown person in blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks, and having things open and close at 5 p.m. or it's a big deal to be able to have, like, you know, the majority of the police department be people of color. But
right.
I think that's one of the things I like about it. I also, from an indigenous perspective, the aspect of having, you know, living and dead at the same time in the same environment always is always something that's been brought up in my upbringing. You know, how life and death and all the other stuff, and all the mysticised stuff and all the you know, the cryptids and all that stuff. It's all around us. It's not in a different realm. It's all within itself. I think it's one of the things that intrigues me. Also, the history stuff about it too. I mean, there's a lot of bunch of Ichabod's one-liners that I always chuckle at. You know, the one about I think the one where like someone buys him food, and then he looks at the tax receipt, and it's like, you know, and he's like, you know, we went to war for like 3% tax raises. Here we are getting taxed 10. You're getting taxed 10% for a sandwich. You know, why aren't people out and revolting and, you know?
But they are. It's called the Tea Party.
So I mean, I think I like a lot of the stuff that I've seen so far.
Yeah.
And it's promising. It's good. I mean, at the beginning I was really skeptical, but now that I've seen probably, like, you know, got into a good chunk of it, I'm beginning to enjoy it a little bit more now.
Right.
There's other stuff that I hope that they do develop more, and hopefully the storyline down the line becomes more interesting. But the whole Thomas Jefferson's a dick line was just like well, golden.
I mean, the funny thing too is, like, you know, I just made a Tea Party crack, but like Fox TV has become like the go-to network for like diversity in prime time, which is interesting, because, you know, I mean,
that's an oxymoron in itself.
Right. Well, but yeah, like, you have to divorce the entertainment side from the news side. But like Fox TV literally had, and, you know, AV Club had an interesting article about this, and I think James Time Magazine had an also a similar article about how, like, the African American characters, or the characters of color that are found on Fox are, you know, like Julie said, normalized and real. And the other show that's kind of made Fox like must-see TV on Monday nights is another show we talked about back in August is Almost Human, and I know Kashawn and Julie are big fans of Almost Human. Kashawn, you and I talked about this the other day. Looking back, and again when we previewed the season, we had circled November because of the debut of Almost Human, and then when that debuted, it also kind of broke barriers and broke ground for primetime television. What do you think the appeal of one Almost Human is, and then just the overall landscape of Fox? So if you go beyond just the genre shows too, if you look at their sitcoms, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Mindy Project, and New Girl are like, also show very normalized people of color relationships with white people. I mean, it's also interesting that it's also the same block that has dads in it, but we won't get into that's a whole other. We won't get into that, but just let's talk about Almost Human and the notion that Fox is probably the most diverse channel on the network. Sorry.
Well, I guess the only thing I can say to that is I feel like, or at least what I hope Fox is doing is they're casting shows more based upon who are the best actors available for for the vision that we have in mind versus who are the actors that are immediately recognizable. I mean, case in point, I think people would know Carl Urban from Star Trek. I think they would, but I don't know that they, unless you watch Star Trek, the two previous Star Trek motion pictures, I don't know that you would know that he was in Doom or in some of these other kind of sci-fi.
Judge Dredd.
Yeah, Judge Dredd. Yeah, I don't know that you would know. Well, in Judge Dredd, he never even takes off the helmet. So I don't know that you would know who he is right off the bat. And same thing with Thomas Ely. I mean, yeah, he's been in some films already, but I'm sorry, not Thomas.
Michael
Ely. Yeah. I don't know that you would know him right off the bat. Although you probably would say, oh, wasn't he that guy in that thing? So
right.
So I feel like. And I feel the same way about that with respect to Sleepy Hollow. I mean, Nicole Beharie, other than Shame, or that movie she did with Michael Fassbender. Other than that,
Shame.
Yeah, Shame. Other than that movie, I don't know that anybody would have recognized her immediately. I feel like, and I hope I'm right, I think what Fox is doing is they're starting to cast more based upon, or at least give license to the people who are pitching the shows to them to say, look, find the best people, regardless of race, color, creed, gender, whatever. Find the best people who fit the characters for this show you want to make. And if you can find those people and sell us that these are the best people, fine. Make the show you want to make. Because really, with Almost Human, I mean, without belaboring the point, because I know Raymond has a thought on this. I feel like that show definitely is more on the strength of the show content versus big name actors. But that said, so far, I like everyone's portrayal. I feel like every person on the show so far has been able to portray their character with some integrity, some genuine balance that I'm okay with, especially considering how much of that show you really have to say, okay, I'm going to assume the future's like this, because it gets pretty wacky with the technology at some point. So,
go ahead, Raymond, make your point, and I want to bring Julian in.
Yeah, I think that with the three shows that we're talking about on Fox, it's interesting that we earlier characterized Ichabod and Carl Urban's character, and to use Brooklyn Nine-Nine just as a to connect the two.
Sure.
Like that Andy Samberg's character, that the three of them are ostensibly the main characters, but in the way, at least in Brooklyn Nine-Nine and in Sleepy Hollow, those are ensemble shows, and I don't, we can say that they're the main characters, but Nicole Beharie's character is just as important, and I think is on equal footing with.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue she's actually the protagonist.
Because she's the one that we use to relate to, actually understand everything that's going on to, and a lot of I think a problem with Samberg in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is that he falls into the background a lot because the ensemble is so strong.
Right.
And Almost Human as a Miami Vice in the future with robots, they're on equal footing,
Right, and I mean that goes back, and and Julie, I mentioned earlier. I mean, I am a fan of Elementary, so I like the fact that, Lucy Liu isn't just like, well, I love that she's not the love interest, and I love that she's kind of she is also on equal footing with Sherlock. And you also have another CBS show, Person of Interest, which is similar in that Taraji Henson was the same thing. But back to Almost Human, you're a big fan of the show too, right, Julie?
Yeah, on a very base level, I find it really enjoyable. Like it's just a good show. Period. I think it's really well done. Like Shawn mentioned, the actors that the two main protagonists are fantastic, and they have this great rapport that it's, I think, really hard to find in especially network television. I think the fact that oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name, but the android
Dorian?
is played by a. I'm sorry.
Dorian?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's played by a person of color. It's just a happy coincidence, just because it's not. I thought my biggest fear was that they were going to try to kind of hit the hammer too hard and make it this very obvious, overt allegory for race, but it hasn't so far panned out that way.
And that's kind of how we framed it back in early August. It was that it would be this kind of like, it would be used as racial allegory, and it's kind of refreshing. So I mean, it's not that it's not either, right? Like it's
no, exactly.
All right.
Sorry, I lost audio for a second.
No, it's okay. But yeah, just finish your thought that it's not that there's not racial allegory, right? Like it's still there, but it's subtle.
Yeah, and it's subtle. It's well done. Again, it's balanced. And yeah, I'm only 3 episodes in. I didn't see the most recent one, but it's still pretty early in the season. But it's exciting and well done enough to be just I'm filled with anticipation, and I think this is the one. This is the one that's going to make it.
Well, and it's been a big hit. So is Sleepy Hollow, and I mean that's the other encouraging thing is that these shows that we that we flagged early on, that we were worried. I mean, we made a joke in that episode about having to do a letter writing campaign to have a season 2 of like Sleepy Hollow, but clearly that's not the problem because that's a big show. So before we go, I wanted to go around the table one more time, and since this is our kind of year-end wrap-up show and looking back, we'll start with you, Rodrigo. What if you look back at the year that was? What was your favorite? What Nerd of Color approved property media would you say was your favorite if you look back over the past year? What did you like?
In the aspect of TV shows or just overall?
Anything, just overall. Like if you had to look back on the year that was and say if there's one N.O.C approved media thing, it would be this. It could be a comic book, it could be a TV show, it could be a toy, whatever.
I don't know. I'm a big Machete Kills fan.
Okay.
And I mean, just to what we were talking before, I took a big group of friends to watch this screening of it, just so we can heckle the heck out of everybody else, because we got all the inner jokes, and everybody didn't get the inner jokes or the aspect of it. I really like the aspect of how Machete Kills or the Machete series has grown. That's one thing. See more Danny Trejo overall he has an amazing life story. If anyone ever checks it out, he has did a documentary on his life, and it's just amazing, the things that he does. But also, like in movies, for me, since I'm a father, the only movies I get to watch are like kid movies mostly, and like a lot of the kid movies I've been seeing a lot lately is having more integration of voices, of brown voices. Like for example, if you were to look at let's see, Despicable Me 2, Macho, one of the bad characters was a brown person, and then if you look at the whole Turbo series, I mean, that was just based on two brothers, Luis Guzman and Michael Pena, and Michelle Rodriguez is in it. So I've been looking forward to that aspect of it, and specifically how like I can, expose that to my kids at the same time. So, and I mean, Sleepy Hollow is something I really like, and I want to get more into it, and I'll spend lots of nights during the holiday break to be able to catch up to everything that I've been watching, just binge through everything. Same thing with Arrow. I mean, I enjoy watching Arrow.
Dude, you're like naming like 5 things, dude.
Hey, you're asking me. Now I'm gonna.
So basically, Rodrigo's one thing is everything, all the things. Raymond, let's move on to you. What if you look back on the year that was? What is the one media property or entity or thing that that you would say, yeah, this is this.
You literally ran out of nouns there.
this defines 2013 for me.
Well, I don't know if I that failed joke earlier when I was trying to do the introduction of holding the book. I have March Volume 1, which I actually have autographed by I'm trying to get it in there.
John Lewis, look at that.
By Mr. John Lewis, as well as the two writers and artists. But I think that's an important moment in the sense of the idea that the visual narrative as a medium is being taken more seriously, and that even if comics are for children, that's not a bad thing, because children can learn new things, and they can experience something through that is worthwhile.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you've read book 1.
Yeah.
Cover to cover, and
yeah,
I mean, it's a great book.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And I think it does speak to the power of sequential art, and to relate those stories. And
right, exactly.
Some people dismiss sequential art as a device, but
right, and that's what I'm saying is no. This is proof. This is proof that you can write something that's for all ages, and that this endless desire to be super serious is antithetic to accessing a real life experience. This is not how life is. There are happy moments, there are sad moments, there are serious moments, and there are silly moments. No one lives a solidly one way or the other life.
And I mean, that's I think March is kind of an exemplar.
Yeah, exactly.
Of that.
The whole opening sequence with the chickens and like that feeling, like that's a very relatable moment, and that's a very human moment.
And the fact that, and to be completely honest, just the picture of seeing Congressman Lewis in Midtown Comics or at San Diego Comic-Con,
right,
with lines of people to get his own. I mean, that's a great choice. Thank you, Raymond. Shawn, let's move on to you. If you had to look back on 2013, what nerd of color adjacent thing would you like to share with us? What did you like the most, Shawn?
Well, I mean, I think definitely this season of Avatar, the core, and we've in various capacities throughout the N.O.C universe here, we've talked about it, but in particular, the way that they addressed spirituality in that season, I guess my thing is, I always feel like the concept of spirituality, not religion, mind you, but it's just being spiritual, having faith in something. I always feel like that's kind of a taboo area in properties that are aimed towards children, because ultimately it's almost like there's this fear of, well, we don't want to be proselytizing, we don't want to be, kind of preaching a particular way of seeing the world to kids. But at the same time, as a criminologist, as somebody who, quite frankly, I spend a fair amount of time researching some rather ugly aspects of society, there comes a point where most criminologists do sit down and say, okay, there has to be some supreme being someplace, because otherwise, how would you explain why people do some of the insanely heinous things that they do to each other? And in the case of Korra, the fact that the way that they presented pure evil in spirituality and pure good, and how there's almost this intertwining of the two, that it's never really one takes over the other. It's just like one kind of ebbs and flows with the other to, just to create balance. And ultimately, now, I guess at the point they've pretty much decided that we're going to move forward with Avatar, where these worlds are not separate anymore. Human world and spiritual world, they're just going to have to learn to coexist. To me, that was a point that I looked at that as being profound in ways that I just wasn't expecting out of something that I was trying to get my daughter to watch. I was literally at the point where, whether she was watching it or not, I was sitting there jotting notes on things that I actually want to start to think about more past the show. Beyond that, the art direction of Korra, to me, I haven't been that interested in how a show is drawn out and how it's directed. I haven't been that interested in it since Samurai Jack. So, but yeah.
You know what I love that on an episode where we have Rodrigo and Julie, that it's Shawn the one that brings up Korra.
I mean, look, because you know what? It's not like I didn't want to speak on it, but hey, man, they were knocking it out. So
yeah, that's right. Speaking of Julie, let's end it on you. Since Shawn took your thunder as far as the Legend of Korra,
I did ask.
What NOC property did you cherish the most this year? Julie?
Can I have two?
Yeah, well, Rodrigo had like 12, so.
Can I have two? Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so number one, I think overall winner would be the release of Boxers and Saints. It's easily have gone up to like my top 10 best books of all time. It's a quick read, but it stays with you, and it's a great. Gene Yang definitely deserved his second nomination for the National Book Award for that. It was a fantastic book. I don't want to give anything about it away.
I think we already did a couple weeks ago, but it's okay.
Yeah, that's true. But television-wise, and it only lasted a few seconds, but that few seconds just echoed throughout the entire world, where in the Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary special of Doctor Who, just for a few seconds you see this meeting of the High Council of Time Lords of Gallifrey, and there was a woman, and not only was there a woman, there was a man of color, and the second he appeared on the screen, I just was like, booyah, because I have gotten in so many internet arguments about how the Doctor, who himself is a Time Lord, is an alien species. Of course, Doctor Who has the capacity to regenerate one day into a man of color or a woman of color or whatever. And people who would just not normally you would label as closed-minded in this way just shut me down over and over again. And like such like a maybe the pinnacle of Anglo-centric television, and at this point like a gestalt. That there will never be they even joke that there'll never even be a ginger Doctor Who. But I always kept that faith. I'm like, that's just impossible. The Doctor can regenerate into pretty much any humanoid type character he wishes. And it would mean like the universe doesn't, spin the right way for colored people or people of color if one day he doesn't regenerate. Yeah, and just to show for that 2 seconds that there was a Time Lord in Gallifrey, and he was real, like he wasn't imaginary or anything, was amazing. It was a huge, huge deal.
And then for full disclosure, that Julie, for those of you who may not have noticed, you live tweeted the the Doctor Who special for us.
Yes, it
when
was
that
a lot
happened.
of
So
fun.
I think all of our Twitter followers knew that moment you were talking about because they were definitely they're definitely following you on that. So hey, and Jayla's back.
Hi.
Welcome back. So we're actually wrapping up, but since you're here, I wanted to give you an opportunity to let us know. So what we've been doing is just reflecting back on the year that was and locating one particular property, whether it be a movie, book, comic book, television show, whatever, song, but in the N.O.C universe that you look back on and say, yeah, that was the thing that
Mine, Saga.
wow.
Saga, and I really enjoy it, even though it's like hyper violent. But at the core, you get a beautiful love story, and then just amazing world building, and you talk about the conflict of different races, different political mindsets, and it's like a twisted fairy tale, and I just think it's one of the best things I've read in a while. Like, I want that to have every Eisner Award.
Yeah, well, and Brian Vaughan and Fiona Staples is kind of a dream team as far as writing and art. So
Yeah, the art is gorgeous.
on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And Jayla, thank you for joining us for the end. I also want to thank Julie Kang, who's out in the Bay Area right now. Shawn Smith, who's down in Virginia. Rodrigo Sanchez-Chavarria, who's out in the Twin Cities, and Raymond Chow, who is up in Brooklyn. I also want to thank Nelson Wong, who all season has been running things, making sure we're all on point on the show. I want to be a little bit self-serving and say that if I had to look back on the year that was and say what is my favorite thing, it would have to be this show, Hard NOC Life. Just the opportunity to get us, me and like 4 or 5 friends together to just talk about the stuff we like or don't like for an hour a week has been really great for me, and I hope it's been great for you. We're actually going to go on hiatus for a while. We'll probably come back after the other side of 2014, but until then, I hope you enjoy yourselves, and see you next time.
Well, it's the N.O.C. in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life, comics, movies, and TV. Yo, pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard NOC Life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share their interests together with a similar kind. When they said John Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments, and the lectures. Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the N.O.C.